actually. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another photo mishmash. This one being broadcast live May 22nd, 2019. I don't remember what my title is for this show. Something like 16-year exposure, 16-year-long exposure. We'll get to that in the photo from space stuff. But this is that weekly show where I'm joined by my good friend Steve. Steve, thanks for joining us today.
Hello, thanks for having me. So I need to let some people in on what our conversation was just before we signed on.
Oh?
He turns to me and he says, I got some really bad news for you, Steve, but we'll talk about it on the live show.
That's right. Good tease. We're going to get to that in just a minute. I don't think I said really bad. I think I just said bad news.
Yeah.
Bad news.
I think you said bad news. Okay. But clickbait nonetheless. So you guys aren't the only ones that are subjected to marketing clickbait.
That's right. Steve, I don't want you leaving halfway through the show. I want you to hang around and find out what this bad news is. All the rest of you need to as well. We're actually going to hit it early on. I'm not going to make you sit there worrying. But we're gonna tease some other things. We're going to talk a little bit. This is the Panasonic S1R. I had that pro-con review that went out. But, based on some market research some other YouTubers have done, is this mount completely dead on arrival? Should you even think about purchasing one of these? How much has Sony jumped up in market share recently? How much do we care? We'll be talking about that, plus editing your Lightroom photos if you're part of our Photo Enthusiast Network membership. And most of the chat room is. Thank you so much for joining us today. We love to have you here live. If you've got questions, whether you're a member or not, if you're in the chat, you can ask them. Just put a little Q in front of it. We'll be gathering them together, and Roy will be adding that to the show notes that we'll get to at the end of the show. We love to answer your questions. And thanks to Roy for putting together the news that we'll get to in a few minutes too, kind of all of the highlights of the past week's photo news. And well, as we do from time to time, if you've never watched the show, we chit chat about things that might not be so photo related, but kind of are.
They usually fall into one of like three buckets, right? It's either photography or sci-fi films like Star Wars, Star Trek, or Avengers, or we're talking about food, and specifically tacos and cilantro and burritos.
And apparently watermelon margaritas. Steve, you'll have to share that somewhere for the wider audience. But Steve sent me, there's a place in New York City you can go and you can get a taco the size of a large baby.
14 pounds.
Toddler. Oh, that's a toddler, I think.
I don't know any woman that's given birth to a 14-pound baby in my life and survived.
Survive. Oh, that's okay. And a watermelon-sized margarita.
Yes. And apparently the whole thing, like the two together, is $150. Now this is New York, so yeah. I don't know where in New York, but I guess it feeds and serves 8 to 10 people, margarita and taco. But can you imagine sharing one taco with 9 other people? I don't know.
Yeah, it's not tacos. I mean, I think Lady and the Tramp, you got that kind of spaghetti deal with it, together. And tacos are kind of in that category. They're a single taco is a little difficult to really share among people.
Yeah, indeed.
You pass it around like I don't know.
That's gross.
I agree. And okay, let's hit a couple other topics real quick. One, kind of a wrap-up review of last week. We spent a good bit of time talking about the very brand new Peak Design tripod. Mine hasn't arrived yet. I contact before my show. I was like, I need to tell my people something. And he's working hard at getting me one. Clearly, I'm not as high up on the list as some other people. But, I just really struggled to get over that $600 price, or about $500 for the Kickstarter. That's a lot. And I started looking around for other tripods, and the best one I could find, and I see Nikki actually just asked in chat, she is trying to figure out a new travel tripod. She's got the little Manfrotto Be Free, which I think is what the Northrops mentioned briefly as their favorite. I don't like that Manfrotto Be Free. I can't remember exactly why, but it's been on a couple of tours that people have brought it on a couple of tours. And there's just a few pieces to it that it just doesn't work so well for me.
Yeah, I have kind of a new concern with the tripod, and then we really ought to get off of this subject because we kind of beat it down to death last week. But one of the things that I was thinking about, if you check their Kickstarter now, they're in excess of $5 million. They wanted $500,000. They're in excess of $5 million. This thing doesn't even hit the market until December of 2019, and they have 12 or 13,000 people that have already funded to get one of these things. 80% of them are going for the $600 model. So, and it's not even going to come out for another 7 months. Like, how long are you going to have to wait to actually get one of these things? How quickly can they ramp up production to produce 20, 50,000 of these things right off the bat?
That's a good question. Yeah.
Why not? Again, we talked about this last time, and I don't know what the answer is, but why a company so big like Peak Designs do you need to do a Kickstarter? Why not just say, hey, we're building this thing, and here's a link for a pre-order at a special price, and then kind of send them out as they come? It seems concerning to me that the numbers are so huge that I don't even know that people will end up getting this thing in December.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you're one of those early purchasers, probably Peak Design has a pretty good track record. But yeah, if you've only recently bid on in the Kickstarter. Yeah, so let me show you real quick. I have bought this. This is the Leaf Photo. So I went and searched. I looked for carbon fiber tripods that were about the same weight, that provided about the same amount of weight limit that they could, capacity, we should say, max load, about the same height. And I looked at a lot of different, both between Amazon and B&H, back and forth. And I actually realized I have a pair of gigantic Leo Photo legs. I've never heard of this brand before. But Steve, I don't know if you remember when I've taken those gigantic.
I do remember.
It gets tall. It gets tall enough that I can actually hang on it, and it's sturdy enough. So I've been really impressed with the build quality. I haven't tried any of their heads. This is clearly kind of a really Right Stuff wannabe lookalike here. I don't know if it's the same. It's got good reviews. Yeah,
except for the twist legs, which I wanted to get away from, but they at least have nice vertical grips on them.
Yep. Yeah. So I still am happy with the twist legs. I know you've been suffering some there, but and again, no, it's not going to pack down quite as tight, but it doesn't have a center column installed. It comes with one, but it doesn't have one installed. So that allows it to be a little bit more compact. It still gets up to that 60 inches. So it'll arrive tomorrow for me, and hopefully the Peak Design shortly thereafter, and I'll be able to talk about these two, because I'm just curious. I don't want to just talk about the Peak Design without having something to compare it to. And what is that? It's at half the price, this, and a little bit more weight. It looks like a nice competitor. So
yeah, I'll be really interested to see that. And then when you're ready to sell that thing, just call up your old pal Steve and we can talk. Because that $600 price point is, I know last week we were talking about it, and it is a serious tripod. Like, for me, who shoots a lot, I don't mind spending that on something that I think is going to last a long time.
Right.
But in the world of hobbyists, that's a lot of money when there's other options out there. So it's kind of interesting to see this whole thing play out. Boy, there was a lot of excitement last week about it, though.
There certainly was. I'll be interested to see if I get any traction putting a video out a week or two after everybody's talked about it. But yeah, I'm curious, and I love being able to talk more knowledgeably, especially for pen members when they want to know. So even if the views aren't there. All right, now for the bad news, Steve. You're sitting down?
I am sitting down.
Okay. So remember this picture that
I'd say to stand up to tell me this. So everybody can see the cool pants you're wearing.
What are you talking about? I'm not wearing any pants at all. Just shush yourself, man. So this picture I snapped in Antarctica as part of our Antarctica trip, which, by the way, David McKay is about to announce our return in 2021. And it'll go out to the pre-list folks first. So if you're interested and you're not on that pre-list, just send David a little email or go post in the pen group, or send me a message. We'll get you on that pre-list so you can get first dibs. I snapped this picture of a humpback whale tail and submitted it to a place called happywhale.com, which uses your pictures, user pictures, to track these different whales, because each of their tails is like a fingerprint. Apparently no other whale swimming around Antarctica has a tail that looks exactly like this one. And Happy Whale looked at it, looked through their database and said, you know what, this is as far as we can tell, this is the first picture of it. So I said, hey, can I name it? And then Steve, you went and said, it's already got a name. That's Steve. He's Pisces. He's 46 years old, and he enjoys long strolls along Antarctic coastlines. That's adorable, by the way. But I have really bad news. They wrote back and said, since you're the first, you can name it. I had to donate a chunk of money, but to get it to be nicknamed Fiona Ray after my daughter, who loves nature stuff. So I'm pretty excited about that. I think that's pretty cool.
That's not bad news at all. That's great news. That's awesome. That's totally cool. And, Fiona, I assume you told Fiona, right?
Yep. Yeah.
She's got to be excited. That's really sweet.
Yeah, she thought that was pretty neat. The sex is unknown at the moment, so later on down the road, it might be people be like, "Why did they name this male humpback Fiona Ray?" But I think that it don't really count because they still have its ID number that probably all the nerdy scientists use. So
you can just name it Fiona Ray, and then in that parentheses, AKA Steve. If that's the case.
AKA Antarctica Steve. Long strolls along the Antarctica coastline. Very nice, very nice. Before we dive into more of the show, just a quick reminder that this show is sponsored by Squarespace, and I have put my money where my mouth is and my mouth where my money is. No, I don't remember how that goes, but I'm in the process of moving my photorec.tv over to Squarespace for a couple of different reasons. But first and foremost is I'm just tired of all the little security issues that I have to deal with on WordPress, all of the little theme stuff that gets broken over time, and not having a single person to go to for tech support. If I go to my site host, they're like, well, that's a WordPress issue. You got to go to the WordPress people. Go to the WordPress people, and you got to go post in the community forum and hope somebody knows what they're talking about. Or you got to go post in the theme section. Squarespace, it's everything. They handle it all for you, all wrapped up into one. Something breaks, something I'm not happy with, something I'm struggling to achieve. I write the same people, and they respond helpfully 24/7 tech support. That right there is one of the big reasons. The other is it's actually going to save me money if I combine my site along with that whole marketing piece that they have now that allows you to email out. It's fantastic. It's great. You can save 10% off your first order by going to squarespace.com/photorectv, which was broken for a little bit. It would get you there, but then Tim let me know that you just could look at the page and there was nothing to click on. I wrote them and they fixed it like that. So squarespace.com/photorectv, save 10% off the purchase, your first purchase, whether that is the site or a domain or whatever you're building there, because it can handle everything. So
good stuff.
Yep. It's taken some work because my site is not small.
I was going to say, you've got that's a real, that'll be a great thing to see, because you've got a pretty complicated website, much more complicated than most of our audience, I'm sure, is interested in. I tend to have just more of a portfolio website, and at some point I'm going to add an e-commerce section so that people can buy prints from there. And the plugins that I've seen look like it's very simple to do that. I just haven't gotten around to doing it and worked that all out. But your website is far more complex, with a lot of updates and links and stuff that you're involved in. So that's going to be really cool to see that play out. And quite honestly, it's probably going to be a great testimonial to Squarespace, because I mean, you're going to have one of the more advanced websites, I think, in their in what they show you, because they don't show you a lot of stuff that has some complexity to it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So. And full, I haven't said 100% I'm going to do this, but I'm moving stuff over. I'm looking how it responds and how it's going to work. And I'm excited so far. So we'll see. We'll see. Yeah. All right. And real quick, the other thing, between our last show, a new video went out. It was my pro con list of the Sony A6400. that little camera continues to really impress me. Overall, the pros far outweigh the cons. I just wish that they would revisit that design and make it a little bit more manually friendly control. It's so nice and lightweight, but that back is a little cramped. So that's really my only real concern. Battery life, even though it hasn't changed battery since the A6000, through their magic of programming and battery saving juju inside, it's good. It's very good. So I'm impressed.
Yeah, that was a great video. And I think probably next on your list, you were going to talk about the weight of your decisions, your Tuesday tip, which was awesome. Now, I know last week you were giving me a lot of kudos for my Tuesday tips, but I kind of peeked at some of our Outlook emails and stuff like that coming in through Pen, and you're getting a lot of play with that one, brother.
Thank you. Thank you. Yep.
Great tip.
Yeah, I when I sit down to write tips, if I haven't waited to the very last minute, I usually end up having a much bigger tip in mind and then just simplifying it. Same thing we recommend you do when you're taking a picture. You bring the camera up to your eye and you're like, I'm going to capture all of this. Your picture's going to be much better if you simplify. And that's what I did with the tip, because next I really want to talk about kind of lens selections and how that weighs in. But to tell those folks who don't get the Tuesday tip, which, by the way, if you're a Photo Enthusiast Network member, you should check your mailbox. Every Tuesday, you get an email from one of us, Steve, myself, David, or Allie, 4 professional photographers, sharing with you our hearts, our minds, our intelligence. Yeah, sharing our intelligence, our wisdom.
Or lack thereof.
Or lack thereof. Yes. I had Chris proofread mine before I sent it out, because I tend to be a little heavy on the comma usage when I don't need to be. I just throw commas in there because I think that's what my English teacher taught me. But anyway, so my tip was really about thinking about weight and how much it impacts your mood in photography. And do you want to upgrade to full frame, or do you want to upgrade to medium format? Which, by the way, we got some rumors, Steve, of the XCD X1D C5050C Mark II.
Wow, that was it's either going to be the X2D or it's going to be the X1D Mark II, but it'll be a 100, not a 50.
Aha. So we'll talk. Hold on. I want to hear your thoughts about that a little bit more. So, but anyway, so that's what that tip was about. Next one that I write, I want to talk a little bit more. Going to use the analogy of a minivan. I love those minivans when I'm driving. I don't know if I love minivans for photography. So join as a Pen member, photorec.tv/pen. So you get these Tuesday tips and access to all of the Tuesday tips we've ever written. And you get a bunch of free gifts for 10-day free trial. You can check all of this out and choose to stick around if you want. Okay. What else? Where are we in the image competition? We're finishing up the month of May. Steve, do you know off the top of your head, for those who are Pen members who need to submit to win awesome prizes from Bay Photo, when they need to have their images in?
Well, you're too late.
Uh-huh.
No, you're not too late for the June competition. So get your images in as soon as you feel that they're ready. You have until June 25th. But the cutoff date is the 25th of each month. So that has now passed for May. So I know that David put a post on, I think, the Facebook group that, hey, the last day is coming up on the 25th. And I'm not sure how much we have in there. So typically I don't check until the end of the month, and then we kind of go through and pick out what we like and organize the file and stuff like that. And then we talk about when to record. So too late to get in for May at this point, but not too late to get in for June. And please, don't be intimidated. We just love seeing. A couple months back, we had a record number of submissions, and there were a lot of names that I didn't recognize. And I can't even tell you how excited that made me. I hate to deliver bad news if you didn't make the top 5, but this is kind of an ongoing process. And then, it's sometimes you'd be surprised. There's things that some photographs that maybe don't make the top 5, but we like to include them to where we can talk about learning opportunities and stuff, and everybody benefits from that. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. We're going to record the May competition video here coming up. and get that out to all you guys. But just so you know, the cutoff date is the 25th of each month.
Nice. Talk a little bit more about something else while I quickly get the Lightroom pictures ready, because I'm not quite ready yet, Steve.
For those of you who don't know what I'm even talking about, and for those Pen members that hear this all the time, you can tune out for a couple minutes. But what we like to do with the Photo Enthusiast Network is help you become better at producing great photographs and finish your editing, and give you tips on how to finalize that project and give it a name, and kind of like you would submit it to a competition. And everything is based on the Professional Photographers of America, PPA standards, the 12 elements of a merit photograph. You can look at that right on their website. And that is the largest, and some say most difficult and oldest, photo competition in the world. Really, really great organization. So check out PPA. And then we've even had member David Newbold. He submitted photos to our review, our competition. And then he submitted images last year. 4 images a year are allowed, and he went 3 out of 4 earning merits, which is a really big deal. So anyway, that's something that we offer through Pen. It's free of charge. It's something that nobody else is doing. And if you get involved with that, I promise you will become a better, I'll say photo maker, because we like to talk about photographers being makers. But we can talk more about that later. But that's just kind of the background on what we're doing.
That's great. Thanks. You know, it's more than just, you know, winning the awards and winning the merits, because you get good feedback from professional photographers. We talk about this a lot. I mean, one of the things that I'm proud of at Pen is the feedback that we can give you all through this show, through posting in the community, either in the Facebook group or on the forum. And then PPA, or through the image review that you just talked about, and where you can win the monthly prizes, or through PPA, that whole thing. And it's just a fantastic way to grow. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so let's dive in. We if you haven't seen the show in a long time, we've moved this section up because we feel really passionate about it. It's where Photo Enthusiast members have submitted images for us to kind of review and give some Lightroom tips and tricks. That's really the goal of this, because as Pen members, you have so many other ways to get straight critiques. This is some critiquing with a real heavy emphasis on, let us show you Lightroom tips and tricks as well, or maybe sometimes Photoshop too. I use both of these programs interchangeably. So I'm going to share my screen here with everybody. And just a reminder, the show notes I mentioned, where we're going to get to stuff in a little bit. Let me, there we go, a little messy here today. You can find those at photorec.tv/MMH. And I think I need to real quick stick this on me. There we go. Okay. So we've got a fair number of images today, so we're going to be a little bit on the quicker side of them. And again, Pen members, feel free to submit any of these back into Facebook group or on the forum if you want a little bit more broader feedback beyond just the Lightroom tips and tricks. So first up, we've got Paul Anderson's Sand Dunes.
Nice.
Yeah.
Paul's, man, I personally know Paul. He's a great guy, and his photography has really grown over the last year and a half that I've known him. He consistently, this is actually right off of what I was just talking about with this image review that we do through Pen. He consistently submits images to the image review every month. And sometimes he does really well. Sometimes they're included as teaching opportunities, and sometimes he hasn't made the top 5. But it's been awesome to see his photography grow, and this is a great example. This image is just beautiful.
It is. It is. Lightroom-wise, really the only thing that I think I would play around with, and Steve, let me know, of course, is over here in the Develop module. This little bit of warmer patch here is just enough of a color difference or warmth that it keeps pulling my eye. But overall, golly, I love how simple this shot is. Just what I was talking about a few moments ago, where I'm sure there was really wide sand dunes and other stuff going on. And Paul, you just narrowed it down. You shot this at 280 millimeters and just said, boom, look at both kind of the small repetition of the little wind ripples and, of course, the larger repetition of the dunes themselves.
Yeah. Now, is there, Toby, if you use that brush, your adjustment brush, and if you could paint on like a drop in exposure and maybe darken the shadows a little bit of that one section that's in the middle, so the second dune back.
Oh, the second.
Yeah.
Right through here.
Yeah, just because it's quite a bit brighter than the others, and it looks like the sun is hitting it dead on. I'd love to see. It's hard for me to tell on my screen, so maybe your screen it looks different. It's hard to see some of the texture that's in there. Yeah. And I think it'd be cool to kind of darken that down just a little bit, just to show the texture, because it looks like it's there, but you run the risk of it looking a little blown out if it's too overexposed.
What you suggested a drop in exposure and one other thing?
Maybe the shadows.
Shadows down a little bit. Or highlights too.
An increase in contrast, but the photograph looks pretty contrasty as it is. I don't think I'd do much with that.
Yeah. Okay. I've overdone it now, so you can kind of see this painting in there a little bit more. So I'm going to bring it all back now. Just remember, with your adjustment brush, you can adjust. And what I did was I upped the flow a little bit too. So it's applying about 50% of these changes here. That's how the flow works. And,
for those that haven't seen this before, you can click on show the mask overlay down in the bottom, and that will show you where you're painting. And if you have auto masking on, it will actually help you stay within the lines, which is very helpful.
Now, what's funny is I put down a tiny little bit up here, so my pin still lives up there, and that's where you have to go back to if you want to delete. I get that question a lot. But yeah, we just painted on here, and I actually had auto mask turned on, so it stayed within this dune, and it probably can then turn it back off down here because you want it to apply pretty evenly.
Yeah.
It was looking for edges there as well. The O key gets that on and off. I'm going to do a new one. And just hit double click effect to reset things, and just cool and decrease saturation just a little bit up here.
Yeah. And I would love to see a black and white version of this.
Yeah. Yep. I was thinking that too. I wanted to fix that to show folks, but now let's switch over to black and white. Ooh, boy.
So you got to do some darkening on that second dune for sure, because you want to tie the whole scene together. But, this would be one of those pictures that I would probably take into Nik filters and work up black and white using the tool that they have in there, Silver Effects. Just because I really, really like some of the presets that they give you as a starting base for black and whites.
Yep.
This would be a great candidate for that. I did a tutorial recently on the Define 2 tool in Nik filters, which helps reduce noise. And those filters are really powerful. However, you can do most of the same stuff with Lightroom too. I just like the base that Nik gives you.
Yeah, yeah. And I believe you've done a video, or David has done a video on black and white. And well, David, I know, has done a whole video on converting to black and white. Does that include the Nik filters?
Yeah, Dave. It's not in the same place. Dave created a whole section on the membership area just for the Nik collection. And he's got a couple tutorials in there, and I know one of them is the black and white. I know he works with that quite a bit. He's the one that taught me to use it. And I looked, and there wasn't one on the Define 2 tool, so I put that in there. So there is, if you go in your membership area, if you're a pen member, go into tutorials, editing tutorials, and there's a section on Nik collection.
Yep. Yeah. We should take some time to show off a little bit of what we've got in there on this show. We'll do that. Let's move on. Paul, great shot. We've moved on to Sue Stevens' cactus flower. And I really like this photo for the reason that it's shooting a flower in that kind of non-traditional from below up. And then we have just a hint of the cactus. We have the tree that it's framed against. There's a lot to really like about this picture.
Yeah, I think to offer a suggestion on the way the photo is taken, first of all, Sue, the angle that you chose to shoot this is outstanding. A lot of times people shoot flowers kind of straight into them. And the problem with that is it really flattens out the look of the flower. It's three-dimensional object, so to get it at an angle like this, and especially cool to look up with the sky as a backdrop, is a really great choice. I would probably offer a suggestion of really kind of darkening down the background just a bit to make it pop even a little bit more. Maybe even, I would say you can add a vignette, but that's going to darken the cactus in that lower left corner. So I'd be careful with that. And then I just go through with Photoshop and just clip out a couple of these little tufts of tree that peek in, right up there, that kind of peek into the frame, but they don't really go anywhere and they just end abruptly. You hear me talk about that a lot. Just there you go.
Yeah.
And there's some really bright branches in the background that you just want to kind of go in and clip those out of there because they're just visually distracting. You want all eyes on that flower, which is the subject of the story and the brightest part of the photograph.
Yep. I'm just doing it in Lightroom just because it's fast, but I was reminded of just how we were talking last week about Brian Scanlon's Slot Canyon shot and the time it takes. I spent about 2 hours Saturday morning working a shot up for a client, somebody who's interested in buying, and just reminded how long you can spend on a single image when you really want to get every piece of it just right. So just real quick in Lightroom, I've just taken out some of those. It's nice because they're so out of focus. Another thing that you could do is you could grab this radial graduated filter, stick it over the flower. Don't want it inverted, so it's affecting the outside. If we hit O, you can see where it's affecting the outside. And so we could decrease the exposure a little bit. And then as Steve mentioned, well, it's also decreasing the exposure of that cactus. So of course we can edit this by going to brush, erase, and let's hit O again for a second. So O, so you can see, make a nice big brush here. And I'm erasing, I don't need auto mask on again. I'm erasing the brush, that graduated filter off that cactus there. And maybe even off the stem a little bit so it stands out. And we want to see what that looks like. We can do this little switch here, off and on. That's too much. You can see the halo. Always watch out for that. I did a bad job. So you got to come back in here and get rid of that halo. But there we go. And now off and on. There we go. Still needs a little bit of more work outside these edges here. We don't want the tips of the petals to darken. But yeah. Nice.
Cool.
We're going to move on to Pam cases. And, part of me, Pam, was like, well, this is an iPhone shot. And then part of me was like, it's pretty cool. We can do some stuff with this. I regularly share pictures on my Instagram from a mobile device, mostly in stories, but sometimes out on the main feed. First thing, I'll come here to crop, and I'm going to hit auto. And it does a nice job of straightening that a little bit for us.
I was just going to say that. First thing we got to do with this one is we got to straighten it. It was slight, but it was noticeable.
Yeah. I don't know if actually auto, if I agree with auto, I feel like it's got to come down a tiny bit more. Well, I don't know.
It's hard to tell because that shoreline kind of moves. I like what auto did.
Okay.
Because that shoreline is kind of moving away from you, so there is a slight angle to it. But you can see the shoreline at the base of the mountain on the right side was crooked in the original image.
Yep. And then there's not a lot of color going on in this, so I'd probably go black and white and increase that contrast. It starts to take on a little bit of a painterly feel because we're not working with a ton of data here, but I think that's kind of nice. And then I'd up the texture a little bit, but watch out for the noise. Or, well, maybe not. Under detail, a little bit of sharpening, but then if we hold down Alt and bring in the masking so that it really is just getting the larger pieces and we're not increasing the noise there. So let's see what difference we've done. Off, on. I see very, very little difference. Any other suggestions, Steve?
No, I like what you did here. I might I don't know that you can do it with this picture. I'd like to see it cropped in a little tighter, perhaps, but I think it's gonna get really noisy. I don't think is this a JPEG?
Yep.
Yeah.
Starts to get a little noisy.
Yeah, yeah, and this is where you start to see, kind of the breakdown of a really small sensor. These phones, they're great. They take excellent snapshots and stuff, but when you start to edit and you want to crop in and stuff like that, the noise just starts to appear, and you're working with such a tiny sensor. Each pixel is so small. There's only so much light that each pixel is able to capture. So great for snapshots. For heavier editing, a raw file is the way to go.
Yep. All right, let's look at Maggie's Chinese lanterns.
Oh, that's pretty.
This is pretty cool. Yeah. It's neat. It's hard to tell. The blacks are so black that it's hard to tell where it actually ends over on the right-hand side until I get the crop dialog up. Would you come in a little bit here, Steve, and just get rid of that guy? That little pink. It's a little pink butt. That's what it is. Yeah. Little peach butt.
It looks cool. I wish it was included in there, but that's part of the problem, right? And that's why I always say clip this kind of stuff out, because otherwise a viewer sees that and they're like, I want to see more, but it ends too quickly for you to have a mental image of exactly what's going on. So yeah, taking that out was a good move.
Yeah. And then real quick, this little light up here, it isn't even reflected, but watch out. Whenever you're fixing stuff, keep an eye out for it with reflections. Keep an eye out for the duplicate reflection of it and make sure you're fixing that there too. I probably would take this out here. It's not part of the story as far as I can tell. It's just kind of enough to be distracting, but be careful. So I'm going to take it out. It's going to look like it's gone very easily. But if this is something that you're going to go take to print, let's just be ridiculous for a second and jack exposure way up. Things can look funny and other stuff can start to appear. So you really want to make sure that it is solidly dark back there and there's not any weird splotchiness or something like that where you, when you go to actually print it. But if we take it back down to that level that you had, we can see that things are good. Things are good. You can just kind of see the ghost of those people still. It's kind of this is just a JPEG. It's kind of amazing how much detail is still hiding in those shadows.
Yeah, it is. And that's a great tip. Oddly enough, I haven't really used that much. If you're working on a darker photo, to just really increase the exposure to find some of the stuff that you can clip out of the background that may not be seen, but is there. And if you go to print, you do have to worry about that.
Yeah. Bumped up texture a little bit. I think this is where you can be a little bit more heavy-handed with vibrance and saturation because this isn't nature. These are, man-made objects that are very colorful, designed to be very colorful. So you want that full richness color to come through. Again, you don't want to push them too far that pinks turn to some radioactive pink or something. But I think we're still within the realm of that here.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's a great shot. Who submitted this one?
This is from Maggie, who, was just on, what trip were they just on with me? I can't remember, but I just saw them again after many, many years. The last trip they'd been on before that, I say Maggie and Joanne was
on the Yosemite trip.
Moab. No, they weren't on just Yosemite. It was something, I don't know. Where did we go a couple of months ago? Or actually, not sure you were on it.
Yellowstone.
God.
Yeah. Sure.
Oh, sorry.
I noticed it shot with the EOS RP, so that's
right. Oh yeah, so she was on. They were on the Southwest trip. They were on the Southwest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It did a nice job. Let's move on. Chris Bartell, who was just with me in Yosemite National Park, where we had some epic conditions. This was one of our more clear days. Captured this fantastic reflection.
Yeah, Chris posted, I don't know if she's in the chat room, but she posted quite a few photos from that tour. And this is another person like Paul I was talking about earlier. I've seen Chris Bartell's photography grow over the last couple of years. I've been on a few trips with her, at least a couple of them. And she really does some nice work. I love the way she finished this one. For those of you seeing this type of finishing for the first time, this is a virtual matte that she's applied around it. And we teach you how to do that at Penn. It's one of our tutorials, but it's also a technique that most people entering competition use with Professional Photographers of America to really kind of just finish the image off. And so I don't know if it's crooked at all, the horizon. It's hard for me to tell, especially because you got a reflection in there, and you got a couple different lines, and they're not exactly running horizontal. They're kind of going away from you and stuff.
It doesn't strike me as being off at all.
Okay. It's probably fine.
Yeah. Maybe the left side could come down a little bit.
Well, that's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah. So this brings up, and I know Allie's talked about this when we do critiques before. Sometimes it's really hard to tell, and even if you do straighten it to your eyes, maybe that wasn't what it actually was. But I'm using like this trunk and this trunk, and that's probably what you were looking at too, Steve. And
yeah, I was looking at that horizon line just beyond those trunks. So it's kind of a brighter green area back there, right where it meets the tree. So I was kind of using that as my perfect horizontal spot.
Yeah. Let's see what Otto put it back, I think, right where it was. And for those who don't know, these little guys right here, tools, you can pick this one up and you can draw a line along the horizon and get Lightroom to straighten it. Now, of course, it looks crooked because of the
matting.
The matting.
Yeah,
that's kind of fun. I'm gonna print all my pictures like this from now on, and watch people as they come in the house cock their heads a little and try to figure it out.
Nice. Yes. Brian Scanlon in the chat room actually has a great point. In that lower right corner, you can see some kind of tufted grass and a little bit of it appears right there too.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that that's part of the reflection. It doesn't look like it. It looks like just the foreground that's creeped in. And I would take that out of there. I'd go into Photoshop and I'd clip that out of there using probably the clone stamp tool or content aware. Just spend a little time getting that out, because then you're keeping the bottom just all reflection and there's no break in that. So that's a great tip, Brian. And when it comes to the virtual matte with a photo like this, one thing I do want to tell people that are familiar with using them or have done them before, be really, really careful when you're using pure white and pure black, because everything else especially be careful on a black and white photograph, but it's pure white and pure black are so pure that it kind of dulls things down in comparison. So what I might consider with a photo like this is actually a black matte that doesn't look like a white border. Therefore, you're not like looking at it through a window frame. It just kind of blends in a little bit because there's a lot of dark elements to this photograph. And then if you want to put a little stroke line in there or a little border, maybe just choose like a green from the picture that just kind of extends that beautiful green around the border, and then you have a black matte. So, Chris, I don't know if you're watching, but that would be my suggestion for a virtual matte change from what you submitted.
Yeah,
but it's a beautiful picture, and to let you know what Brian said as well, you clean up that little tufted area down there and just have all reflection in the bottom and submit this to image review for competition. I think it's definitely a worthy picture.
Yeah, it's really nice. I'm a little torn about this. This absolutely, this bit of green here I would take out, but it is a small amount. I'd love it a little bit more, but it kind of grounds me, and I kind of like that tease of the land it's shot from as well. So I'm not totally on board with taking this part out. But man, if
there was more of it,
yeah.
I would definitely say leave it. It's there's just,
I know, right here,
there's just not quite enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's a beautiful picture, even if you leave it in there. I'm just kind of offering a tip on taking it to that level.
Yeah. The only other Lightroom tip that I might try here is, again, you've seen this, so I'm just going to, you've seen this today even, folks who are watching. I paint on a tiny bit of warmth. These guys got a little blue up here. You don't quite have that in the reflection. The reflection is just fantastic. It's perfect. It doesn't feel overdone. It doesn't feel fake. So I would just warm that up a little bit and maybe a tiny bit. I'm going to overdo it just so you can see it, but maybe warm it up a little bit more. Yeah, way too much. Just to battle back a little bit of that blue and haze, just a little.
So this is a DNG file. Do we actually see her edits?
Yeah, I guess. Go
into a graduated filter at the top and see if there's any pins anywhere.
Nope.
Okay. Nope. Okay. One I was thinking, I wonder if, she put one up there and kind of brought some blue out of the sky, and then that kind of made the mountains a little cooler. But
yeah, no. Really, the only thing I see is shadows and whites have been tweaked. So I don't know if it's hard to believe this is straight out of camera like this with only those 2 tweaks. So maybe we have kind of a partially edited DNG. I'm not sure.
Yeah. It looks like some contrast has been added. Yeah. What is she shooting with? Does it show?
Chris is the 7R Mark II.
Oh, okay.
Which we'll talk about in the news section a little bit, but this Yosemite trip had more Sonys than any other prior workshop we've run. And in fact, the Sony was the most, more Sonys than any other camera on the trip.
Wow, man. Yeah. And then for Canon, I saw the news report, and we'll chat about that later.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Let's see. In the name of time, Paul, we already looked at one of yours, and Sue's, and we actually looked at one of yours as well. So we're gonna wrap up. We'll come back to these in a future, whatever we call this show that we're doing, and we'll come back.
I'd like to include both of those for sure on a future episode because.
Yep. Thank you, those who submitted. If you're watching and you didn't submit, think about submitting in the future. And if you're watching and you're not a Photo Enthusiast Network member, think about joining, because not only do you get this benefit, but you get so much more. Hundreds of hours of video content, those Tuesday tips we've already mentioned, the forum, a place where you can ask questions, new video content being added every single week. It's great.
Yes.
Okay. So we got a couple of, we're going to do some gear news first. We got a couple of posts here, and then we'll hit some other stories. Number 1, Sony overtakes Nikon for the number 2 spot from Canon. No, Sony overtakes Nikon for the number 2 spot behind Canon. So this is a new story from Metapixel via DP Reviews, I think where it came from originally. So Sony had a sales call, a earnings call not too long ago, and has said that they are now in the number 2 spot for interchangeable lens cameras, and their revenue has actually gone up. Now, so, I mean, it's kind of a big deal. And I just mentioned in the Yosemite workshop, without a doubt, the most Sonys we've ever had. And all of the Sonys together, mostly it was A7R Mark IIs and A7 IIIs and A7R IIIs, mostly, and then an A6000 or 2 series. So they're definitely doing a good job, and they have been really strong in kind of marketing now, because there's some confusion among the others. Now that we've got this full frame, all of the mirrorless have their full frame out. We've got this lineup with a 1 mount strategy, and they're really emphasizing that, which I think is pretty smart of them to do, because we don't see that from Nikon or Canon. In fact, Canon is extremely confusing, I think, with EOS M and then the R, and then of course EFS and EF. It's not extremely confusing, but I certainly think that they are in this kind of flux state that hasn't done them any favors. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's kind of exciting. And let's tie that in with, I'll just keep showing you show notes here. These are what you can come see if you go to photorec.tv, is Tony's recent podcast. He truly believes that the Sony E mount and the Fuji X mount are the only 100% future-proof mounts. Now, that might be a little bit hyperbole, but he's basing this on some of the data that the companies have released, and then more so really just kind of looking at what's selling on Amazon. And, you know, which the scientist in me says, I'm not sure exactly how hard a data you can pull from that, but, you know, Tony and myself, we've got a lot of experience. We have a lot of people talking to us about what cameras they're using every single day. We hear these things. And so while all of his data that he's using to support this argument might not be as sound as some of the others, I think he's generally correct.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a big statement, though. Future-proof mounts.
Yeah, I know. I think it is definitely speaking hyperbole there to some degree. I think Canon EOS mount, the RF mount, the Nikon Z mount, these are going to be around for many years to come. But he shares he's got some real concerns about how Nikon is doing on the whole. And my anecdotal evidence about the Nikon is that they're selling fairly well, but certainly not as good as they had hoped. Partly evidenced by these serious price drops without the cameras being out too long. They're not sales. These are price drops.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then the Canon EOS M mount is doomed. I think it's weird. It's in this kind of weird spot where it is their crop mirrorless. Excuse me. And where's it going to go? It doesn't, you can't use RF mounts on the M like you can with the whole EF and EFS system kind of going back and forth. And then L mount, which I teased here at the very beginning, this lovely Panasonic, which if I push it that much further, it's blurry, fantastic. But, oh, man, they got a hard road ahead of them. I will think that we'll see these prices drop. I think there is some life in here on the video side of things, but photography-wise, it's a hard sell to come in with such a limited lens selection, so expensive lenses, and hard to really say what's a big difference over the Sony or medium format prices as they've come down in the Fuji realm.
Yeah, that Fuji X mount, that X system is quite a. I think Fuji's whole strategy in this camera world and all the competitors and how crowded it's become has proved to be a very smart move, going from just making outstanding crop sensor cameras to making a great value mirrorless medium format and skipping the whole full frame mess altogether. There's a lot of people vying for that business, and you have all different types of mounts that are starting to appear as we move from DSLR over to mirrorless. And I think that Northrop's comments are taking a little tongue in cheek for me, but I think that X mount is a good move on Fuji's part, and Sony has been doing a really nice job. So there's probably a little bit of truth to that.
Yep. Yeah, and Kyle points out that Sony's basing this on revenue, not cameras sold, which is very much a good point. There, it's one of those things where depending on what metric you use or look at, you can kind of interchange who's in the top three or who's this or who done that. But it certainly represents a trend in a certain direction that I think Sony can be proud of, and certainly Crow's. John says Tony's gone a little far for him on the extreme side with statements lately. Yeah, no offense to Tony or anybody, but man, that's what gets the views when you put up those headlines that people are like, "What? I gotta watch this!" And then we all go and watch it. So, other quick news story that I'm excited about is that DJI has committed to, in their next round of consumer drones, adding AirSense technology, which is chips that can communicate with nearby aircraft. I haven't read up on how this actually works. I should when I'm trying to talk about it knowledgeably. But the idea is, so if you're flying and you get within range of a helicopter or something, your drone will actually know that. And that's kind of cool. I'm allowed to fly here from my house. I'm not that close to any airports, but we have helicopters that come over and they always look really low to me. So even though I can fly my drone up to 400 feet, these helicopters, because we're on a hill, don't feel like they're full 400 feet. So I'm always nervous, and I never really fly too high around the house because if a helicopter comes whipping over the hill, that's not good.
Yeah,
not good at all. So the idea that maybe my drone can take, cautionary procedures or drop in altitude or come back home or something like that, I think is a good thing. Now, the other camp will say, well, DJI is so tight, and I know some people can't fly theirs from their house because they live too close to an airport, or maybe it's an old airport that's not even properly marked anymore or used, but it's still, so that can be frustrating. But in general, I think this is a good thing, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I'm excited about it too. I think my stance on the whole drone thing has always been that safety and public nuisance. You know, if you have the technology to make these things as safe as possible and not getting in the way of aircraft, certainly falls in that category for me. So that type of technology can't make it to drones fast enough, and hopefully it's something that will be cheap enough that they'll be able to put that in virtually every drone. 2 years from now is going to have that. And then the whole public nuisance thing. Oh geez,
yeah.
I love drone photography. I love what it's done for the world of photography and videography and everything else. But I also get a little concerned when it just becomes more commonplace. And but I don't know. Everybody's got a cell phone in their hands, and there's plenty of people out there that don't know cell phone etiquette. But speaking macro among everybody, people seem to behave themselves for the most part, considering how many of them are out there. But all these drones flying overhead, I don't know. I just get a little creeped out by some of it. So,
yep.
And the easier you make them to fly, the more people will, and the cheaper they are, the more people will buy them. And but I don't know. I don't have a real clear-cut opinion, I suppose, on that. But
yeah, I'd love to see, there are still people flying them in national parks. I hear about it all the time. People write me, or I see posts. And so I think that I'd love to see DJI lock that down more. If you're not allowed to fly there, you should. Oh, we just saw somebody flying at Yosemite, and, they were flying out in the field. We were driving, weren't able to stop and be like, hey, you're not allowed to do that here, bonehead.
It seems like every U.S. national park that we go to, and even national parks internationally, every single time we do a tour, somebody's flying a drone there.
Yeah.
I'd say almost 100% of the time now. And that just happens to be when we show up, for a 2-hour shoot or something. You can imagine how much that's actually going on.
Right.
And that's just kind of aggravating.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. As a drone owner, I agree. Let's talk for just a few moments. Again, lots of articles we're skipping over, including some useful information like, do your sky replacements look like crap? Here are some reasons why. I should go watch that. I've never been happy with any of my sky replacements. It's not something I try very often, but the few times I have, I'm not very happy with it. So that's an article there. This is kind of cool. An airplane made fence holes for the plane spotters photographers. I think I love that. And but let's go to this. How many megapixels does a good man need? Why has it got to be a man? How many megapixels does a good photographer need? This at first struck me as it looks like an older article because, well, just kind of the way the guy's website looks. No judgment. But here it is.
Jeez.
This is the online photographer, and he's talking about his 6 megapixel APS-C DSLR that he really loved. And he's talking about over time. This isn't an old article. This was written as of yesterday, posted as of yesterday. Talks a little bit about Sony 42 megapixels, and he has fallen in the range of about that 24 megapixel zone. He's had a camera with up to 36, but he really likes that 24 megapixel zone. And I think it's pretty good. What is interesting to me, though, do you know Tom Hogan? He runs, I can't remember what the name of his website is right now, but he runs a fantastic website. He's full of awesome information, mostly about Nikon, but he started to branch out in the last couple of years, talks more about mirrorless. So he says back in 2005, he wrote that 24 megapixels would be about where the crop pixel push would end. But down here, I think this is interesting. He says, what's going to happen with prints, quote unquote prints. And Steve, I think this is going to make you feel a little sad, is he really feels like they're going to go digital. They're going to be displayed on 8K or higher flat screens. So he's talking 5 years or more down the road, I would assume. And 8K is about 33 megapixels. So, or higher. So that's what's going to start to dictate how good today's images look 50 years from now. So that is an interesting idea. I don't know. Got any thoughts there, Steve?
Well, let's see, 8K. I mean, 8K is here. It's people can't afford it, but it's here. 50 years from now, oh gosh, who can speculate 50 years from now with as quickly as technology is changing?
Yeah. It is kind of neat to imagine and both scary to imagine that most physical prints on your walls may be replaced by screens that have that type of resolution at some point in the future in the next 50 years.
I could definitely see that happening, and not 50 years from now. I could see that happening in 10 to 20 years, easy. With all these wallpaper televisions and stuff like that that are coming out, and everything's just becoming less and less expensive. I love the scene in, I think it's the movie Total Recall, the original one with Arnold Schwarzenegger, where he comes home and his whole wall just turns into whatever scene he told it to be out there. So he lives in some apartment in some urban environment, and probably just a brick wall or something like that, but it just turns into this whole like lake scene or something, and it's all video screens. And I bring that up because that movie is pretty old now, but it was like, I remember seeing that at the theater and just thinking, that is the coolest thing that's going to happen in our homes one of these days, is these walls are basically just going to be big screens, and we can kind of put whatever we want on them. I, for one, think that's really cool. And I'm a big nostalgia guy. I like mid-century modern. That's kind of my thing. So I think mixing some of this technology and these big screens and stuff with some, well-built wooden, non-IKEA kind of stuff would be a neat look. So it's, on one hand, it's sad because I am a huge advocate for printing your photographs and getting them on walls. On the other hand, I think that could be kind of cool. You run out of space for a nice view, you can have whatever view you want and have it be a shot that you took.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I remember that movie Total Recall. I love the wall scene. And you could certainly get there now with projectors, but we're not at that resolution where it's going to look believable, or even, you're going to see the pixels. It's not going to be very exciting unless you have a very small wall.
Yeah.
A little dollhouse wall. I remember that I teased in the title. I want to talk about this briefly because I don't think you and I have talked about this. I think it was Kaz and I were talking about this the other day. There's some unhappiness with Lightroom right now. We've certainly talked about that. That's a recurring theme on shows, with both what they may charge in the future, and or they're a little slow, and or they seem to be putting so much energy into that other app that none of the more serious photographers, myself, you included, use. But when I step back and say, okay, I'm not that happy with Lightroom, I'm not that unhappy with it either, and I see certainly room for improvement. But Photoshop, man, is a powerful program, and it's very hard for me to imagine giving up Photoshop anytime soon, even if they go to a $20 a month subscription. Now, I am not a hobbyist photographer, so I certainly am setting myself aside. If you're a hobbyist photographer, at $20 a month, then this does become a little harder to swallow. But Photoshop and Lightroom together, that is powerful, and just nothing else is quite at that level yet.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I've been saying all along here is Photoshop, and as I've grown as a photographer and I've traveled more and I've done a lot more editing and stuff, it's like you'll have to pry Photoshop out of my cold dead hands. I just don't know who's going to come to the market with something that is comparable to Photoshop, and all the time and energy and blood, sweat, and tears literally that are invested in learning Photoshop, because it is a complex program. It's not quite as intimidating as most people think it is, but once you start to learn how to use it, you take a lot of pride in that. I don't want to go through a whole learning curve with something as complex as Photoshop again. Something that does what Lightroom does, yeah, I'd be open to that, but I'm not giving up Photoshop anytime soon.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to chat. I'd love to see. Suggest what is the first program that I should look at that you think can replace Photoshop or may in the next version or two. I'd be interested. And mostly what I'm thinking about when I think about Photoshop is really how well those kind of clone healing tools work, and they work really well.
They do. They work
well. Yeah, sorry. Nikki points out that just drink 3 less Starbucks a month and you've got your $20 extra. That's true.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good point though, and that's been my message over the last couple of weeks. Is my frustration with Adobe isn't solely based on the software itself. Yeah, I'm frustrated when it gets clunky and it's not fast enough. And I get really frustrated because we as users have been demanding that for a long, long, long time. And Adobe, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. They're probably doing what they can to speed that thing up, but it just doesn't feel like much. It's kind of like Canon with their introductions lately. Like you get your hopes up and then it comes out and you're like, well, no, this hasn't been speeded up at all. You know, but my gripe has been just some of the marketing avenues that they've taken lately with this $20 a month and with, you know, threatening lawsuits and stuff like that. It's just, you know, as a company as big as Adobe, somebody in some boardroom somewhere, some team has got to sit back and say, you know, our clients may get a little offended by this. Maybe we should kind of ease into this sort of change.
Yeah.
Or ease into this sort of language, or explain ourselves before we start threatening people with lawsuits, because there is an explanation behind all of it.
Steve, you're asking a gigantic company to make sense. Is there any that does that these days?
Very few, my brother.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. No, I agree wholeheartedly. John Mayfield, I know Adobe's not going to $20 right now. They were just testing, teasing the waters, whatever. But yeah, that's something that made a lot of photographers pause and sit up and say, well, is it still worth it to me? And I just wanted to say, when I really think about it, yeah, because that Photoshop, even if I don't love Lightroom.
Yeah, I'm looking at John Mayfield in the chat room. He says Adobe should work at combining programs at this point. No reason Lightroom and Photoshop can't be combined. Premiere, After Effects, Audition could be rolled into one. I think that's a great point, John. I know that, you know, the processing behind Photoshop and Lightroom is totally different. One is altering the pixels and you can't work on a raw file, so you have to convert it. The other one is actually just a set of directions on how you want to view your raw file. But you could combine those two and seamlessly make that happen in the background with people not having to toggle back and forth. That is kind of a hassle. And it seems like we keep getting close to that. You know, Lightroom just keeps getting better and better with a lot of its tools, but it's still just not Photoshop. You know, why can't you just have some of the most used tools of Photoshop just right there in Lightroom? And
yeah,
I guess it's just the file would have to be converted somehow.
Yeah, but you could think you could figure that out. Brian points out that old code is hard to keep around. You know, this is a program that is getting old now, and I said this last time. I do think that they have run up against the brick wall with it and are kind of at the limit of what it can do, and so their goal is to bring the CC up to parity and then just kind of push us all over.
Mm-hmm.
So, and hopefully we won't be forced to use the cloud. And there's a lot of the organization side of that CC tool doesn't do yet. So let's just hope. Hey, also, Brian, I know I liked you already, but I like you even more when you point out that Patagonia is one of the few large companies that make sense. I love Patagonia. I know their clothes are expensive, but when I buy clothes from Patagonia, it feels like I'm partly giving to a fantastic charity and buying myself a really nice piece of clothing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like Patagonia's stance on virtually everything. They're a great environmental company, and we are. I wish we were sponsored by Patagonia, but we are in no way sponsored by them. But I've sent stuff back to them that I've had for literally 10 years, and a zipper broke, and they just fix it and send it right back with that lifetime guarantee. They do a good job. I'm turning into more of a Fjallraven guy these days because they're from Norway, which is a little closer to Sweden where the Hasselblad is. And
All right. Let's move on to these photos from space. And we don't have a photo from space, but what we have is a video. And I maybe mislabeled this and said 16-year long exposure or something like this. It's 16 years worth of pictures from the Hubble Space Telescope that have been kind of cobbled together to give one of the best views of a certain region of the sky, the Hubble Legacy Field. And here it shows you that it's about the same as the full moon in the sky, which is not that big a space when you think about it. But you can come down here, what's that, 30 minutes, 30 arc degree minutes or something. I'm not an astrophotographer, but something like that. So we look at this view and we've got some fantastic galaxies. Each of those, I would guess, is roughly the size of our home Milky Way. And then here we are zooming out from this digital picture. I don't know if it says how many megapixels, but it just keeps going and going. And then my brain starts to hurt, Steve. I mean, it starts to not even begin to comprehend what we're seeing here.
Your hair hurts?
My hair hurts. Yeah, what I have left hurts.
I've seen graphics done like this that are just fascinating, where you have narration kind of telling you how far away you are and stuff and how far you're getting. But this is the real deal.
Yeah.
Which is just really cool.
And that actually, I like to go off topic. I want to wrap up. We've got some great questions to get to, but did you see these couple of UFO style videos floating around for the last couple of days that the Navy released?
Oh, I saw a headline of that and some grainy photo that was kind of posted under the headline, and I meant to click on the story, but I never did. So share away.
Yep. So I don't want to talk about the UFO part of it at all, because I don't know. It's interesting. It's like, what is this? These Navy guys, you hear them over the radio. They got some salty language, and they're like, what the hell is this thing? But what I took away from that is, holy crap, they got some tracking capabilities. I mean, I never really thought about that. Certainly on my DJI drone, I'm impressed with how well it tracks me riding my bicycle down the street. But here, they have this little object down below them against the waves. You can make it out, but it's hard to see. And it is just going foom, foom, foom through the frame. I think what happens is it passes out of the frame, the camera readjusts, and it goes through again. And somehow, the guy in charge of the targeting computer locks onto it, and then boom, the camera is just following this thing at these crazy speeds. That is some impressive tracking. And then I was like, well, duh, of course. I mean, whatever DJI has, the Army must have like times 10. So yeah, that's all.
Well, you know, all of our, I remember years ago, I want to say this is probably, I don't know, 2009 to 2011, somewhere in there. It was a big deal. And many of you probably remember this. They said starting, tomorrow or starting at the end of this month, the Army's stay on a lot of this GPS technology is going to be declassified, and you're going to be able to get this in consumer products. And I was using like a Garmin, GPS in my car, which would get me at that time, within like a block of where I needed to go or something. But overnight, all of a sudden, it got you down to inches, if not centimeters from a certain point. And the government had that for years, if not decades before. So it's absolutely mind-blowing to think about some of the technology that is actually out there and possibly being used. And then, of course, you open up all kinds of conspiracy theories and stuff. But those are, to me, always just kind of funny. I'm just more fascinated by what is out there that we just don't even know about.
Yeah. There's a lot. I mean, I just obviously looking at all of those galaxies and all of that space, and then zooming out, and then that led me to think about the UFOs that I saw those headlines. Yeah. And again, all of these articles that we've talked about, plus lots more. We didn't actually mention the end of the line for the 7D line. We're at the 7D Mark II.
Didn't talk about the X1D Mark II.
Oh, yeah. So, Steve, tell us a little bit about that, because we definitely tease that.
I don't know too much. I do follow the rumor sites as much as I can, but that is very quiet. It's, Canon and Nikon and Sony, you can find a million rumor sites out there. With Hasselblad, it's like there's 2 sites, and the last update was 2016. So there's not a lot out there, but Supposedly a lot of the stats have been leaked, and it'll be that same sensor that Fuji is using. I think Sony built that sensor. I know they built the 50 megapixel sensor, but it's 100 megapixels. They're talking about it shooting 5 frames per second. No in-body cameras, in-body stabilization, which Fuji actually does have in the GFX 100. So no in the Hasselblad. A fixed 3.2-inch screen, and then an increased electronic viewfinder, increased battery life, but still using the same, small lenses and stuff. 1/2000th of a second on the shutter, which can flash sync because of the leaf shutter in the lenses. So that's a big deal for.
Yeah. What's the top shutter speed in your X1D?
2000. So
okay.
It's the same. Yeah. Okay. And it can be flash sync to that.
Yeah, that's impressive. Yep.
So to me, it sounds like the body and stuff will probably be quite similar. You'll just have a bigger sensor and a few more niceties to it. I'm not getting rid of mine anytime soon. Quite honestly, 50 megapixels is more than I need at this stage in the game, and it produces beautiful photographs, and the file sizes are big enough. I've got equipment that can kind of handle that right now, but every trip I come home and I'm like, whew, man, there's a lot of file space that's being taken with these now compared to some of my older cameras. So
yeah.
I can't remember what else I read, but
okay.
I think that Fuji has a winner on their hands, no question about it. Price on the Hasselblad, I have no idea. Some people said 10,000, which would match Fuji's price. Other people have said 15,000. Personally, I think it's going to fall somewhere in the middle there, and I think that the Hasselblad's not a company that cares to really price compete with Fuji, and I'm not saying that it's better. It's just that's their brand. They're always super expensive, and they don't seem to really give much of a rip. However, DJI now owns them, or at least the largest market shareholder. So, they're a great innovation and marketing company. So maybe they will drop the prices. Who knows?
Yeah. And lens-wise, we still only have primes for that Hasselblad mount, right?
They've got one zoom coming out at some point this year. It was on their roadmap, and I can't remember when this year it's coming out, but it is coming. But yeah, right now everything is prime, and they've got a good selection of primes now. When it was first launched for the first couple of years, you kind of had like 3 to eventually 4 lenses that you could play with. In fact, they sold a kit that was just like the camera with 3 prime lenses for the longest time. But they've introduced a few more. I think they probably have 8 of them now, and then they've got a zoom lens coming. But the longest, David and I have talked about this on tour, the longest length you can get right now is 135 millimeters, and then you could buy it with a 1.7x extender to take that out. But the hard thing with medium format is it actually widens out. So like I have a 21 millimeter lens, which really is shooting at 17 millimeters. Yeah. So, if you're going for length, if you're trying to get out there as far as you can, let's say you got a 400 millimeter lens, well, you put it on medium format, and then all of a sudden you got to back it off a little ways. So
yeah. Cool. All right. Well, we'll look forward. I mean, the reason why we're talking about it is it has been registered on another country's database. A Bluetooth specification has come up with that Mark II version. So we should be getting pretty close.
Now, what I will say, because on paper, some of you know this story, I was all set on buying the Fuji GFX 50S back when I got my medium format. Because on paper, it was a no-brainer. You got a bigger lens selection. It was less expensive. It was Fuji, which is actually a brand that I just love. And I was totally sold on it. I tested the camera, and then I tested the camera that I bought. And the big thing with me was the ergonomics and the size and everything that Hasselblad did with theirs. And I hope that they retain that with the 100. Because that, I think, is the leg up that they have on Fuji for certain shooters like me that want a smaller body size. And I put that thing in my hands. The ergonomics of it is just unbelievable. It just feels so well built.
Yeah. Cool. All right. And then just to the 7D, it seems like latest rumors are that won't be continued. There'll be a mirrorless version of it instead at some point in the future. I certainly, again, we've said this on the show, so I'm going to be pretty brief about this. We've said this prior. Canon, as big a company as they seem, they do have limited resources, and they are going all in on this mirrorless. So it does make sense for them to say, okay, we got to cut some of these other lines now. We can't afford to, people power or R&D, marketing, all of that. We're going to shift it over in this direction. That sounds true. But part of me, when you think about the 7D system, it is always built like a tank and built for speed, both fast focusing and fast frame rate, neither of which they've shown they can even begin to achieve with mirrorless yet, really, especially the focusing. So I'm on the fence about this rumor. I think if it's true, and I lean a little bit more towards that it is true, I think it's going to be a while before we see a mirrorless from Sony capable of replacing, from Canon capable of replacing the 7D line.
Yeah.
Okay, let's hit a couple of quick questions before we wrap this show up. Nikki wants us to talk about tripods again. Actually, she asked this at the beginning of the show, and I talked about it briefly. She wants to upgrade from the Manfrotto B3. She's looking at brands on B&H, doesn't really recognize many of the names. Anything particular to look at or stay away from?
Good question.
We still are quite happy with the Mi Photo line. We mean kind of McKay photography people. We recommend that brand, except for their Air line. Their standard Mi Photo backpacker and road trip, the carbon fiber ones, I think are very good. Very good.
Yeah, I would say
mine is not
personally with Mi Photo, I wouldn't go any smaller than the road trip. I know, Toby, that's the one that you've used for years. Yep. I bought my wife the Globetrotter, which is one step up. That's actually the biggest one that they make. But I bought that in a carbon fiber, and it's nice and light. It's a great tripod if you wanted to go the Mi Photo route. My gripe with Mi Photo, I think it's an outstanding tripod. And to anybody on a tour who's a casual shooter and wants a good tripod for the money, I think that there's no better bang for the buck out there. But my gripe with it is the ball head. If you're getting serious about shooting and you want, a ball head that's really going to last you a long time and is super, super stable and can hold a lot of weight, you can possibly outgrow the Mi Photo. And, there's been plenty of times where I've taken the carbon fiber legs of my wife's Mi Photo, and then I put on my Really Right Stuff ball head, and it's a great combination. So you can always do that later. But, for the money, including a ball head, I think they're a great way to go. As far as companies to avoid, Toby, that's much more in your realm.
Yeah.
There's a lot of these companies that I don't recognize. I know a lot of people like those three-legged things.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be really well built. I personally just think they're aesthetically, I think they're hideous. But that's my personal opinion.
Aesthetically, that's my favorite thing about them, actually, is that they kind of look a little funky and a little different.
Oh God, that's just figures. We're so opposite on everything aesthetics.
Yeah, I think they're a little over-engineered and a little overpriced, the three-legged things in general. This is the other newer Mi Photos that I don't like. Sorry, their Road Trip S series.
I wasn't familiar with this.
Yeah, they've just come out recently, and the heads are the knobs are hard plastic, and it's just that's the wrong way. Mi Photo, come on, dum-dums, let's go. But I think the standard ones are good. Steve, I wanted to ask you, when you put your Really Right Stuff head on the Mi Photo, I mean, it didn't collapse under the weight. It didn't burst into flames from it didn't eke out the words "I'm not worthy."
Yeah, well, it started to, but I sweet talked it. I'm kind of a tripod whisperer.
Yeah,
and I put a sticker on it that has my name, so it feels special now. That's because everybody has Mi Photo tripods on our tour. So yeah, definitely label your stuff when you come out and tour with us. But no, it was great. And Toby's joking because I have the biggest Really Right Stuff ball head. It's the BH55, and it's just overkill. Now I've used it for years for my real estate and everything. Yep, there she is. She's a monster. Holds 50 pounds, weighs a ton. So I actually really want to downsize my travel ball head and go with the BH30 because despite what it says on the website, it will actually hold probably more than it states. Their stuff is just the best made, tripod equipment out there, in my opinion. But you pay for it. You pay a fortune for it.
I tease, but I am super jealous of your ball head, Steve, and I am extra jealous of this lever right here.
Yeah. So, Nikki, if you are going to invest in something like Really Right Stuff, I would say for travel, the BH30, Toby's pulling it up right now. It's still expensive. I get that. It's $300. But make sure you do the compact lever release clamp, that one, because it's unlike any other thing on the ball head, any other control. You never get it mistaken for something else, and it's so fast and reliable. It's like a bicycle. You know how you put the wheels on your bicycle, you lock them on, take them off. You can do that for decades. Never wears out. It's a great design.
Yep. Tim writes in the chat, put your Hassie on top of all of that, and he's surprised the legs didn't go run and hide.
Just build it up from the ground up. That's good.
Yeah. I briefly Googled on B&H the Siru tripods. I got mixed experience with those, but I think there are some of them offer some decent value for the money. I really just don't think you can go wrong with a Mi Photo kind of road trip or globetrotter, either the aluminum or the carbon fiber. The carbon fiber is more expensive, but it saves you a little bit of weight. And that's the one I've been carrying around now for over 3 years. And I'm very happy. And I don't take care of it. I don't clean it.
Yeah.
And in fact, the other day I used it and I was like, ooh, the legs are still wet from rain in Yosemite a week earlier. And if you give it a little sniff, it smells like old wet socks. That's honestly how one time on a McKay trip, I could tell my Mi Photo apart from somebody else's. Audi had the exact same color and they looked very similar. I sniffed mine and was like, yeah, this is mine. So I just admitted that. Sorry.
That is horrible. God, what the heck's wrong with you, man?
So many things. Frank wants to know if the 90D is going to happen soon, or if that's still a rumor. This is the Canon 90D. It would be the replacement to the very popular and quite good Canon 80D. And Frank, I just don't know. I suspect that we won't see that very soon. We're kind of past the spring release time. I think next might be fall. But I wouldn't be surprised if Canon pushes a little bit and says, hey, we got this really cheap full frame mirrorless, the RP, that you all could try instead. Full frame, people, full frame. Everything's better in full frame and it's cheap. So I think they're going to sit on that a little bit. I would be very surprised if it comes out soon.
I know there was a rumor a week or two back that was all the specs were out on what they didn't know if it was a 90D replacement or 70 Mark III, but it, given the specs and the possible price point, it certainly looked like a 90D for sure. I don't know what their release schedule is. You have a much better handle on that kind of thing. It just kind of seemed to me like that's possibly around the corner. Boy, they got a lot of life out of that 80D. That is still a camera that I can highly recommend to people who want to go from, just a rebel to the next step, or kind of get into buying something decent that's easy to use.
Yeah, Frank, I really probably don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm not saying that with any irony, because I Googled it real quick just to check up, and you're right. The rumors have been coming out left and right. Some as recently as just a day ago with that. I remember now did read the 32.5 megapixel sensor, so maybe they will surprise us and it'll be out soon.
Yeah, what we don't know is the dual pixel autofocus and with video and stuff like that, or 4K.
Yeah, 4K. Yeah, I suspect it will, but it'll continue to be cropped like it is.
Which is kind of strange. That has become a popular vlogging camera. The 80D had.
Yeah. Yep, that's very, very good. All right. Andrew, you want to know if there's a video about packing your camera bag. You're having problems packing your camera bag and fitting everything you need. I'm not sure. I'd Google. Well, no, I was going to say I'd go back to whoever you got your bag from and see if they offer, like if you got it from Think Tank or Mindshift, if they offer any videos that kind of showcase. We talk about packing, but every bag is so different as far as the height and the height of the gear you're putting in it. It's a little tricky. And then of course there might be the issue of you might just have more gear than you can fit in your bag. Sometimes you outgrow your bag. So
yeah, and then I change mine around a lot depending on what I'm bringing. If I'm bringing long lens, if I got the Canon stuff. I know my Think Tank airporter bag, when you unzipped it when it was brand new, it had this big cardboard thing in it that was a picture of the interior of the bag with the separators and then all the lenses.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
And I thought that was really cool. And on one side it was Canon, on the other side it was Nikon. It was just kind of funny the way they did that, but they showed a couple different configurations. And I remember taking that out, setting it on the bed next to the bag, and actually just trying to I'm like, that looks great. So I put the separators in there to kind of look like the picture and then put my gear in, and that was very helpful. So their website may have some stuff like you suggested. That's actually a good opportunity, I think, for some type of video tutorial too in our travel section on the membership site, is to, I mean, we each pack our bags differently, but some people might like to see that.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, it might seem silly to some, but I absolutely agree. I mean, sometimes taking cameras, separating the camera and the lens gives you a better option. Sometimes keeping it together. Andrew mentioned since picking up the 150 to 600, that's really straining the bag. And yeah, that happens pretty quickly. Once you get one of those longer lenses that takes up the whole center section, then it becomes a bit of an issue.
Yeah, actually, hang on a sec.
Sure. While Steve is away for just a second, I want to mention, Tim reminded me that there's a fantastic deal on B&H today. Tim, I'm not sure I can convince Megan, but the Apple 27-inch, which is what is sitting right here next to me with a Retina 5K display, is on sale for $15.99. This is the machine I use for all of my photo and video editing. It does only come with 8 gigabytes of RAM, but that is an incredibly easy upgrade. You just go on owc.com, you tell it what iMac you have, you tell it you want up to 32 gigs, and you pay like 200 extra bucks or 400 extra bucks. I'm not sure what it is these days to get that. And you have a pretty dang nice machine ready to go. Again, I can't stress how gorgeous this monitor is, how much I love the monitor. I don't want to tell you how much I paid, but I have had it for a while. But $15.99 for this. I'll put a link right down below this video. You have just 5 hours remaining on that deal. And also I did send a newsletter out today with a few other deals. Okay. Thanks, Tim, for reminding me. Megan, you should buy that for Tim because he's funny and we love him. All right, Steve, what do you want to say?
Well, it's right here. So I thought Andrew has this same bag. He said he's got the green Mindshift bag that you have.
Yeah. Yep.
The same one in black. Just as an example, I don't know how well you guys can see this.
Yeah, pretty well.
This is, my open camera bag. I've got my camera with a longer lens right here, and then I put the separator. But when I take a really long lens, I just take these separators out and I move them over here. So I've just kind of created these 2 columns, and then I bent this one over to fit the side of the camera. And then over here is kind of a narrow area, so battery charger and straps and stuff like that. And then over here I've got places for what do you call it, filters and that kind of stuff. And then here is usually my headphones and stuff I use when I travel, and I just pop that out on the airplane and stuff. But this works out really well for me. So with your longer lens, I would just say, you just kind of run it down the middle, and then these become, you can just kind of use them on the side as you need them. So it's, there are some limitations to this. It's a 26-liter bag, but just to give you an idea, Andrew, since we have the same bag and I happen to have it right here, and I have, hey, look.
Hey.
Nice me photo This is the Globetrotter, for those of you that are interested in this. Yep. This is carbon fiber. I don't know what it weighs, but this is it with the stock ball head on it. And there's the, everybody do this with all your stuff, your batteries, your chargers, your camera, your tripod. Put your name on there with a sticker or something. So when you come out on tour and there's 15 red Globetrotter tripods out there, you know which one is yours.
Yeah, it's a good idea. We should hand out those little little cocktail things at the beginning of trips to let people like mine is the palm tree. Mine is the dirty socks one.
Yeah, just smell Toby's.
Yeah. Quick correction. While I was talking about that iMac, I actually have the i7 version. I've been very, very happy with it. The i5 version is going to be a little bit slower, but I edit 4K video with no issues. If you're not doing that, I think you're going to be quite fine. And again, the screen itself is just lovely. And you have an iMac too, Steve. What do you work on?
Yeah, I think I've got the same one. I basically what I did is I emailed Toby and I said, you know how I edit, blah, blah, blah. I need a workhorse computer to replace my desktop, which was 7 years old. And he came back to me with basically exactly what I should buy. And I went, okay, cool. That's what I'm buying. And it was that machine. I think it was late 2017 when I got this one. And then what I did to your recommendation, I used your links that you sent me on the email, is I bought the machine with, I think, 8 gigabytes of memory. And then I went to OWC and I bought the extra memory from them because it was way cheaper. And then literally the day the machine arrived, I popped open the back and I put the extra memory in there. And the stock stuff is, well, I think I added to the stock. I think there were 2 4s and then I put 16s in there or something. But I just couldn't be happier with this computer. But I've always been a Mac guy. I probably always will be a Mac guy. And the screen is just gorgeous to edit on. No color calibration is needed. Just pop it out of the box and start having fun with it.
Yeah. Nice. All right. So if you're watching this and you're interested, I'll put a link right down below, but that deal is good only for just about 5 more hours. If you're watching this and you haven't hit that thumbs up button, that's nice. It's a nice way to thank Steve and I for our time. And just a reminder that you can save 10% at Squarespace by going to squarespace.com/photorectv. That is squarespace.com/photorectv. And if you're watching this and you're not a Photo Enthusiast Network member, you should consider joining for all of the extra goodies and education and entertainment, and to be part of a truly fantastic community. And I say that thanking all of those who are part of the community that are in the chat right now. Thank you for hanging out with us.
Yes. Thank you very much.
I think we're done, Steve. Steve, thank you for hanging out with us. I know you are on the East Coast. I don't know if we tell people that these days. We're on the East Coast, so it's like bed-by time for you. And I do love how close your Hasselblad was to your bed. Now we have confirmation that you slip it under your pillow from time to time and sleep with it.
Yeah, when I first got that camera, my wife nicknamed it Hussy. Hussy, it was Hussy. You're not bringing that Hussy into bed with us.
Yeah. All right. And thanks to everybody who took some time to watch us today or whenever you're watching. I hope we'll see you again, I think, next week.
Yeah.
Bye-bye for now.